it's taking note of a unit that's been developed at the Commission. It describes sex assignment surgery as torture. It condemns all forms of discrimination and gets into political issues, and calls for states to produce data on homophobic and transphobic violence. And by the end, it was very interesting because last June, there was no longer a consensus, and so it had created it had started as a more of a goodwill, not goodwill, I don't know what the word I'm saying, but it was a very neutrally worded, carefully worded resolution 5 years ago. And by now, you could see the divisions splitting. So if you go to the footnote and read carefully the footnotes of the 2013 Sexual Orientation OAS resolution, you see Jamaica and Guyana and lots of countries in the Caribbean that are sort of taking exception to some of the wording. And so what we're seeing here is a split in the hemisphere in terms of political issues and who is supporting what and who is taking which side. And I mean, obviously, much of that is related to the fact that there are 11 countries in the English-speaking Caribbean that criminalize homosexual behavior. So it did create a bit of a split. I just wanted to talk quickly about what the Commission has been doing on LGBT rights. They've had 22 hearings over the last 5 or 10 years on LGBT issues. Some have been country-specific, Guatemala or Haiti or Venezuela. There's been regional discussions and workshops and presentations on LGBT issues and homophobia and violence in the Caribbean, in Central America, as well as themes, thematic, indigenous, lesbian, intersex, prison, civil unions, and transgender. And I would recommend that you go to the sessions link of the IACHR website. It's iachr.org. It's in Spanish and English. And if you click on sessions, it will go to webcasts of all the sessions, the hundreds of sessions that have taken place over the last several years. And you can even go to a link on LGBT issues, which then clarifies the link to certain webcasts and certain hearings that have been LGBT specific. There have also been press releases, so the Commission is very good at monitoring and putting out press releases on the latest violence against LGBT people in the hemisphere. So you get a good read on that. Embedded within the annual reports of the Commission, you also have what you see is increasingly larger and more detailed sections on LGBT issues. Now, the country reports, there was a really good one on Jamaica that came out a year ago, and it has a whole chapter on LGBT issues, which this is all free and accessible on the IACHR website, so I would recommend going to that. Also, precautionary measures, which is kind of a legalistic term, which is kind of used. They can come in if they want. Precautionary measures are kind of like injunctions or what's the word? Orders, temporary orders to order the state to protect people that are under risk, so risky situations. So they have done this 9 times over the last, since 2003, where they've actually issued precautionary measures to activist LGBT leaders in the Americas to protect them for their work, who've been receiving death threats. There have been educational seminars that have taken place throughout the hemisphere on various topics. And there's also been individual petitions which have led to important decisions. So on topics such as pensions, prison visits, estate law, HIV status, invasion of privacy, and expulsion from the military. So you have to remember that these are often countries that are in the convention, which means that the state is required to go to a hearing and to listen to the concerns of the NGOs that are and lawyers that are defending the victims, and they have to come up with a solution. And if they don't, there is the threat that that could be moved to the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, and I don't think any Latin American country wants that. So they take it very seriously, and I wanted to just talk about one of those LGBT cases that did go to the court, and it's the case of Karen Atala in Chile. So this has so far been the only LGBT commission case that has moved up to that level. And it's considered by many, the decision Atala, Rifo, and Daughters versus Chile at the Court of Human Rights is considered by many to be a breakthrough for LGBT rights in the Americas. So Karen Atala was a Chilean lawyer and judge. She was married with 3 daughters. And in 2002, she separated from her husband. She took custody of her daughters. And after her husband moved out, her girlfriend moved in. And the father sued her for custody of the children, claiming that her homosexuality could endanger the children and expose them to sexually transmitted diseases. And because she was a judge, so she knew the law. But she was also very vulnerable in that situation. And so the lawsuit led to media coverage across Chile on this topic. It was really sensationalized. Her workplace in the court, they did a judicial investigation of her, alleging that she was unfit to be a judge. And this went all the way to the Supreme Court of Chile in 2004, which found that her daughters were at risk because she was a lesbian, and sided with the father and awarded him custody. So this was, I'm not going to get into the mechanics of the commission, but the idea behind the commission is that you have to exhaust your last remedy in your country before it can be forwarded to the commission, to the court. And so that's about as far as you can go in Chile as the Supreme Court. So she then submitted a complaint to the commission. That's the report number that can be checked. And basically, in the complaint, her lawyers argued that homosexuality cannot be considered a just cause for declaring her unfit as a mother. That led to a decision. The court, the commission concluded that Chile was responsible for the discrimination against Karen Atala and her daughters. And so what the commission does at that point is it tries to work out something with the state. So there was a mediation process that took about a year, I think, and they could not come to a conclusion. So they couldn't come to a good mediation, and so the commission said, okay, we're sending this to the court. So they don't do it automatically. They're trying to get buy-in to the goodwill of the state to change laws, to indicate that they are going to make a change, and they would not. So what happened was it got sent to the court. And so finally what happened was the decision of the court in February 2012, the caso Atala, Rifo y Niñas versus Chile, sentencia de 24 de febrero de 2012. Basically, the 6 judges were unanimous in their view that Chile had violated her rights. The justice ordered up by the court was both concrete and symbolic. Not only was Chile ordered to pay her $50,000 in damages, but also to pay medical costs for psychotherapy that had been incurred by the victims over the years, and to provide 4 more years of psychotherapy to the victims. And the court ordered Chile to implement permanent anti-homophobia training for judicial officials across the country. And in December 2012, the Chilean Justice Minister publicly apologized to Atala. And in its decision, but it wasn't just, it was, the state was motivated to do that because in the actual sentence, in the judgment, the Court of Human Rights stipulated that the ceremony be attended not only by, it had to be state officials at the highest level, and it also had to be attended by NGOs, support groups, women's groups who had supported the victims over the years. So there was both the concrete and the symbolic. And then my last slide is just saying that that potentially has a ripple effect, because within months of the Atala decision, the Supreme Court of Mexico cited Atala after striking down a law in the state of Oaxaca that prohibited same-sex marriage. So you can see how this inter-American jurisprudence is something that is certainly paid attention to by other states and can potentially have an impact. So I thought it would be nice to leave on a positive note and finish on that as a kind of a way of summing up that I think there is hope for change, and that change is actually happening. And I would be interested in hearing your perspectives. So thank you.
So it's noon, so we have 30 minutes for questions. So it's all yours, and you may ask a question in French or in English. Joaquin?
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. My question is just in regards, do you think, I mean, the case of Chile, sets a precedent for some other actions to be taken, but do you think any other Supreme Courts, I don't know if you've seen in your research, or have you thought of that, within different Latin American states or other states, let's say in Africa, the Middle East, if they're going to move towards that, or if it's just going to stay at the Inter-American Commission for Human Rights, right? Because Chile, within Latin America, is known for being a progressive country, right? Do you think that it's, maybe you can predict, as a coming trend, or do you think it's just going to stick and Chile is going to be the exception?
Oh, that's a good question. Thank you. I can really only speak generally, number one, because I'm not a lawyer, but you might have some thoughts on that. But I think a couple of things. One is that one of the criticisms of the Inter-American human rights system and the decisions of the court is that a decision that's made in one country in Latin America, for example, does not necessarily stick in another country. So that there could be a similar law in another Latin American country neighboring Chile, let alone on another continent, that is just as discriminatory. And one of the criticisms has been, oh, the court is, it's not strong enough, it's not, it doesn't have the strength to carry that. But I would argue that much of human rights jurisprudence is the symbolic victory that underlies that, and that I think it's perhaps unrealistic at this point to expect that just because Chile makes that change, that automatically other countries are going to follow suit. But I think if you take a step back sociologically and look at how countries in Latin America have changed over the last 15 years, you could say, well, hey, 15 years ago, there was no same-sex marriage, for example. Now, Uruguay, Argentina, la Ciudad de Mexico, you know, there are certain places where you can get married, and that's a change over time, and that all these decisions are going to feed into that. That's just my general. Hi, I know you.
Doug.
Hi.
Thank you for being with us today. I have a quick question. In terms of Canada's representation in the OAS, certainly bilaterally, the minister has made it clear that Canada's we were promoting decriminalization and basic human rights for the LGBT community. In terms of the inter-American system, how much is Canada? What exactly is Canada's position in terms? Are we supporting don't kill them, or are we supporting, like for example, like the case in Chile? Like what exactly Canada, like how far is it going in its multilateral relations with the inter-Americans?
Well, I'm going to repeat my disclaimer that I'm not here to talk about Government of Canada policy on LGBT issues in the hemisphere. I think there are other people that are in a better place to do that. I can just say very